How many times has someone started praying the Rosary full of intentions, only to feel their eyelids growing heavy and their mind drifting before even reaching halfway? It may seem like just physical tiredness, right? But what if it's something deeper? What if this exhaustion is a sign of an invisible battle happening at that very moment of prayer? The body might be tired, yes, but what about the soul? Strangely, there's energy to scroll through a phone for hours, but when it comes to prayer, sleep arrives without warning. Coincidence? Maybe not. Padre Pio knew this well. He faced sleepless nights, immersed in prayer, while opposing forces tried to pull him away. It's not just ordinary fatigue, it's spiritual resistance. When someone decides to pray, especially the Rosary, they are stepping into battleground territory. Why do you think the mind wanders, thoughts scatter, and even yawns come uncontrollably? This doesn't happen during a TV show or a casual conversation. But when prayer begins, it feels like a weight settles in. It's a clear sign that prayer bothers someone who prefers to keep the faithful away from it. What if this fatigue isn't an obstacle, but a test? Have you ever thought that by insisting and persevering, you may be achieving something the enemy wants to stop? Each Hail Mary spoken with effort carries immeasurable spiritual weight. And what about the moment someone falls asleep holding the Rosary? Could this struggle continue in the spiritual world, even during sleep? This is how Padre Pio viewed it, and what he revealed might completely change how you see this challenge. Padre Pio didn't see prayer just as a religious practice but as a spiritual combat. To him, fatigue during the Rosary wasn't a reason to give up, it was an invitation to persevere. He himself endured sleepless nights, often exhausted, but never abandoned prayer. He said that each Hail Mary spoken, even amidst sighs of tiredness, had an incalculable value. After all, if it were easy, it wouldn't be a true sacrifice, and faith grows precisely in those moments when the soul must overcome the body. The Capuchin saint taught that fatigue in prayer was an opportunity to grow spiritually. He compared this effort to that of an athlete who continues training even when muscles scream in pain. If a runner stops at the first sign of exhaustion, they'll never reach the finish line. The same applies to the life of prayer. If someone stops when they feel tired, they miss an opportunity to mature spiritually. It's in the toughest moments that the sincerity of faith is proven. Praying when inspired is easy. Praying when exhausted is a true act of love. Padre Pio also taught that God values effort more than perfect results. Many times, people get frustrated because they can't maintain focus or because they nod off during the Rosary, but what really matters is the intention of the heart. If there's a genuine desire to pray, even when the body doesn't cooperate, that prayer is precious in God's eyes. And there's more. There's a bigger reason behind this fatigue, an invisible factor that explains why the Rosary prayer is so challenging. After all, if it didn't have tremendous power, it wouldn't face so much resistance. Padre Pio knew this, and this is where we begin to understand what's truly at stake. Praying the Rosary isn't just a pious habit, it's a direct confrontation against forces that don't want to see faith grow. Padre Pio saw this practice as a true spiritual battle. And it makes sense because when someone decides to pray, it seems like everything conspires against them. Sleep comes suddenly, distractions appear out of nowhere, and the mind becomes restless. This doesn't happen by chance. It's as if an invisible resistance tries to prevent the prayer from moving forward. And if this happens, it's because this prayer has a power that many underestimate. Imagine a soldier in the midst of a war. He gets up, holds his weapon, and advances. But as soon as he approaches the enemy, obstacles arise to discourage him. In the spiritual life, the Rosary is that weapon. When you begin to pray, opposing forces try to divert attention, weaken the will, make you quit. But just like a soldier doesn't abandon his mission at the first sign of fatigue, the Christian must resist as well. If prayer were irrelevant, it wouldn't face so much opposition. The difficulty itself is the proof that it is effective. Padre Pio used to say that the devil fears the Rosary. And why would he fear it? Because each Hail Mary spoken is an open wound in the realm of darkness. When a faithful person persists in prayer, even when they feel their mind wandering or their body complaining, they are advancing spiritually. And this is where many give up, unaware of what's at stake. The enemy doesn't mind when someone gets distracted by worldly things, but will do everything to stop someone from praying. And if there is this resistance, it's because this battle involves much more than one might think. The Rosary is not just a repetitive ritual, but a powerful weapon that has already transformed countless lives and impossible situations. Throughout history, there are records of battles won, inexplicable healings, and surprising conversions attributed to the power of this devotion. Padre Pio always said that the Rosary was his sword, and it wasn't by chance. Many saints and faithful who followed him experienced peace and divine protection while holding that Rosary in faith. But if this prayer has such great power, why do so many abandon it halfway? The problem is that the effect of prayer isn't always immediate. Unlike pressing a button and receiving an instant result, prayer requires perseverance. Many people want visible signs at the exact moment they pray, but God works in His own time. There are accounts of armies changing the course of a war after praying the Rosary, families being restored, and people freed from addictions that seemed uncontrollable. But these changes came because there was persistence. Praying just once and expecting an instant miracle is like planting a seed and giving up before it even has the chance to sprout. And when it seems like nothing is happening, that's when the prayer is working behind the scenes. With each Hail Mary, something shifts in the spiritual world. Padre Pio knew this, which is why he never let go of his Rosary. He didn't expect to see with human eyes, but trusted that each prayer had a real impact. But if the Rosary is so powerful, why is there still so much fatigue and difficulty in praying it? Perhaps the answer lies in Padre Pio's own words. Padre Pio explained that fatigue during prayer can have three main sources: the natural weariness of the body, spiritual attacks from the enemy, and divine permission for a momentary rest. The first reason is simple: the human body has limits. After a long, exhausting day, sitting down to pray can be a challenge. But then, why is it that we can stay awake for other activities, like watching a movie or scrolling through social media? This selective fatigue raises an intriguing question. What if the exhaustion isn't just physical, but also spiritual? The second reason is a spiritual attack. Padre Pio warned that when a person decides to pray, especially the Rosary, opposing forces are set into motion to discourage them. It's not a coincidence that the mind wanders or distractions appear from nowhere. This happens because prayer has a real effect on the spiritual world, and the enemy does everything to interrupt it. When someone feels an irresistible sleepiness right when they start to pray, they might be facing something beyond simple fatigue. And that's where the third reason comes in: divine permission. Sometimes, God allows this fatigue to happen to teach something greater. It might be a call to trust more in Him, to learn how to pray in a different way, or to understand that perseverance in faith doesn't depend solely on emotions or sensations. Padre Pio said that even when prayer seems weak, it holds value in God's eyes. But what to do when this fatigue sets in? Are there practical ways to face it? Padre Pio had answers for that. Padre Pio not only recognized fatigue during prayer, but he also taught how to deal with it. He advised simple but effective changes: switch positions, take short breaks to breathe deeply, and if necessary, even pray while walking. The body influences the mind more than we realize, and small adjustments can make a big difference. If sleepiness strikes, getting up and taking a few steps while continuing to pray can be enough to push the drowsiness away and maintain focus. After all, the goal isn't just to recite words, but to enter into true communion with God. Another powerful piece of advice from Padre Pio was to use short, faith-filled phrases to ward off distractions and resist discouragement. Phrases like, "May Jesus live forever," or "Mary, help me," not only strengthen the spiritual connection but also repel any negative influence. He knew that the enemy flees when the name of Jesus is spoken, and that perseverance in prayer weakens any evil resistance. That's why, even in the toughest moments, he would repeat small phrases of praise to keep his mind aligned with God. Additionally, Padre Pio recommended not getting caught up in the idea that prayer has to be perfect. What matters is the intention, not flawless execution. If the mind wanders, simply bring it back without discouragement. If the fatigue is overwhelming, praying little by little throughout the day can be more effective than forcing through a long prayer all at once. What matters is not giving up. And for those who persevere, there's a greater benefit than imagined. The Rosary prayer isn't just a routine, it's a true spiritual workout. Just as the body grows stronger with physical exercise, the soul becomes more resilient through constant prayer. Padre Pio always said that spiritual strength doesn't come from easy moments, but from persistence through difficulties. Those who learn to pray, even when tired or distracted, develop an unshakable faith. And that strength manifests not only in prayer but in all areas of life, making a person more patient, resilient, and confident in God's will. God doesn't expect perfection in prayer, but sincerity. Many give up on the Rosary because they think they need to pray it with absolute concentration from start to finish. But Padre Pio taught that God values even imperfect prayers, as long as they are made with love. He compared prayer to a small child who, trying to speak, stumbles over their words but is still heard and loved by their parents. The important thing isn't the fluency of the prayer, but the offering of the heart. And even though sometimes it may seem like nothing is changing, the soul is being strengthened in ways that are invisible. Perseverance in the Rosary not only strengthens faith, but also brings tangible fruits. How many times has persistent prayer changed an impossible situation? How many testimonies of healing, protection, and miracles have emerged through continuous prayer? Padre Pio knew that, by persisting, the soul opens up to something greater. And this strength doesn't come alone. There's a powerful intercessor who walks alongside those who hold the Rosary in faith. Padre Pio always said that holding a Rosary was like holding Mary's hand. He understood that the Rosary prayer isn't just a repetition of words, but a direct path to the heart of God's Mother. When a faithful person prays the Rosary, they are not alone. Mary is there, interceding, protecting, guiding. How many times has a child felt helpless and, turning to their mother, found comfort? So it is with Mary. When praying the Rosary, she draws near and presents each intention to Jesus, interceding as the best of mothers. Throughout history, countless testimonies exist. Numerous saints and faithful have experienced miracles and healings after praying the Rosary with faith. Padre Pio advised everyone to seek refuge in Mary, knowing that those who place themselves under her protection are never left unsupported. Great battles have been won through the power of this prayer. From the smallest problems to the greatest afflictions, those who turn to Mary find help. And if even the holiest have trusted in her intercession, why not do the same? But Mary's intercession is not limited to great miracles. Sometimes, the greatest gift she grants is inner peace, the certainty that one is on the right path. Those who pray the Rosary with perseverance feel this presence, even without visible signs. And this experience doesn't have to be solitary. Faith grows even stronger when testimonies are shared, inspiring others to discover this transformative power. Faith grows when it's shared. Padre Pio always encouraged people to speak about the graces received through the Rosary, knowing that testimonies strengthen those still struggling to persevere. How many times has a simple account of a miracle or an unexpected answer from God reignited hope in a discouraged heart? One person's testimony can be another's spiritual fuel. That's why the faithful are called to share their experiences, not to exalt themselves, but to show that God acts in the lives of those who trust in Him. And it doesn't have to be a grand miracle to be worth sharing. Sometimes, it's something simple, like the peace found amidst a turbulent day or the sense of protection while praying the Rosary before bed. It's these small confirmations that show how prayer isn't just a habit, but a real bond with the divine. Those who have experienced something like this know there are no coincidences when it comes to faith. And sharing these experiences could be the key for someone who's discouraged to start believing again. So, why not share an experience with the Rosary? It could be a moment when the prayer brought comfort, a grace received, or even an unexpected lesson learned. Each story is a spark that can light the flame of faith in someone who needs it. And as more people testify to the power of prayer, the community becomes stronger and turns into a true army of faith. But all of this only makes sense if there's one certainty. Prayer is never in vain, and even when it seems there's no answer, there's a greater reason behind the perseverance. Padre Pio always repeated, prayer is the key that opens the heart of God. But how many times does someone pray and feel like nothing is happening? It's easy to give up when the answers don't come on time, when fatigue takes over, or when the mind gets distracted. But the Rosary is not just a way of asking for graces. It's an exercise in perseverance, a spiritual training that shapes the soul to trust in God even in the silence. Each Hail Mary spoken is a seed planted, and in due time, the fruits will appear. The greatest victory of the enemy is convincing someone that their prayers have no effect. How many times has someone thought about giving up because they don't feel anything while praying? Padre Pio taught that prayer is not based on feelings, but on faith. Praying is an act of trust, even when everything seems stagnant. God hears every plea, even when the answer takes time. And sometimes, He doesn't change the situation immediately because he is first shaping the heart of the one who prays. Perseverance is not for God, it's to strengthen the one who prays. So, giving up can't be an option. If fatigue comes, pray anyway. If distraction arises, bring the mind back. If the answer doesn't come, trust that it's being prepared. Because those who persevere in prayer, as Padre Pio taught, not only receive graces, but experience an inner transformation that changes everything. And this change doesn't only affect the soul, it affects the body as well, because prayer can bring something even more surprising. The Rosary doesn't just bring one closer to God, but also transforms those who pray it. Padre Pio understood that continuous prayer wasn't just about asking for blessings, but a means to shape character and strengthen the soul. Those who persevere in the Rosary notice subtle yet profound changes. Patience increases, humility becomes more natural, and anxiety gives way to trust. It's not an instantaneous process, but a transformation that happens from the inside out. And this change isn't just spiritual. It affects the way a person lives, reacts, and faces daily challenges. The Rosary prayer teaches lessons that go beyond faith. Praying every day requires discipline, consistency, and surrender. Gradually, these habits reflect in other areas of life. Those who learn to be faithful in prayer also learn to be faithful in their commitments, to be more patient with others, and to act with greater wisdom. It's like training a muscle that, over time, strengthens and becomes more resilient. And the more one prays, the more they realize that the difficulties that once seemed unbearable become lighter. But this transformation doesn't only happen on the emotional or psychological plane, it can also bring physical changes. The inner peace gained through prayer has the power to restore health, relieve stress, and even strengthen the body. How many testimonies have already shown that the Rosary was an instrument of healing? Sincere prayer touches dimensions that science still tries to comprehend. And when it comes to healing, the Rosary has an impressive history. Padre Pio witnessed countless times the power of the Rosary, not only in spiritual life but also in physical health. How many accounts exist of people who, through constant prayer, were freed from illnesses, addictions, and inner turmoil? The Rosary is not just a devotional practice, but a channel of healing. It's not magic, nor an instant formula, but an act of faith that opens doors for God's action. And this healing can manifest in various ways, sometimes as a visible miracle, other times as an inner peace that completely transforms the way a person faces their pain. History is filled with testimonies. Saints, such as Saint John Paul II, attributed their recovery and strength to the power of the Rosary. People who were given up by doctors found refuge in prayer, and in some cases, complete healing. But more than healing the body, the Rosary heals the soul. Anxiety, fear, insecurity, these all lose their power when the mind and heart turn to God. How many sleepless nights have been calmed simply by holding the Rosary and surrendering everything to Mary? Healing isn't always as expected, but it always happens in some form. And it's not just about grand miracles. Often, the greatest gift prayer brings is the strength to endure pain, the clarity to accept God's will, and the serenity to face challenges. The Rosary doesn't just ask for miracles, it prepares the heart to receive them. And for this prayer to have even more power, something essential is needed: inner silence. It is in this space of stillness that God speaks. Padre Pio understood that prayer is not just about speaking, but also listening. And to hear God, silence is essential. In today's fast-paced world, where notifications and worries compete for attention, finding this silence may seem impossible. But it's precisely in these moments that the soul needs it most. The Rosary, when prayed calmly and meditatively, becomes a path to this inner stillness. Each mystery is not just a mechanical repetition, but an invitation to reflect on the life of Christ and allow God to speak to the heart. Meditation during the Rosary completely transforms the prayer experience. It's not just about saying words, but immersing oneself in what's being prayed. Imagining each scene, feeling present in the mysteries, visualizing Mary and Jesus in each passage. All of this strengthens the spiritual connection. Padre Pio encouraged this practice because he knew that the true power of prayer lies not in the number of words, but in the depth of surrender. And it is in silence that God most touches the soul, bringing answers, peace, and clarity to the restlessness of the heart. And if the mind drifts, returning to focus is part of the process. No one learns to hear God overnight. The secret lies in constancy, in the willingness to shut out the noise of the world and create space for God to speak. The Rosary is a key to this encounter, a bridge between restlessness and peace. And for those who persevere in this practice, the fruits are inevitable. After understanding the power of the Rosary, the importance of perseverance, and the transformation it can bring, a new question arises. What about when spiritual discouragement knocks at the door? How many times does the soul feel heavy, with no desire to pray, no motivation to seek God? Padre Pio taught that these moments don't mean failure in faith, but rather a call to an even deeper prayer. Discouragement can be a test, a trial that prepares the heart for a new spiritual level. And the Rosary is one of the most powerful keys to overcome this inner darkness. Often, the cause of discouragement lies in the concerns of life. Financial troubles, family difficulties, challenges at work, all of this weighs on the shoulders and saps the motivation to pray. But it's precisely in these moments that prayer becomes most necessary. When the mind is overwhelmed and the heart restless, the Rosary acts as a balm, calming the thoughts and bringing clarity. Padre Pio said that, even when one feels nothing while praying, the prayer is still working. God's silence never means absence. Sometimes, it's simply an invitation to trust more. But how to combat this discouragement in practice? First, by accepting that it's part of the spiritual journey. Then, by making prayer an unnegotiable commitment, even when the desire to pray is absent. Strength comes with constancy, and grace manifests at the right time. Those who persevere in the Rosary discover that, little by little, discouragement loses its space and gives way to a stronger faith. And for those who insist, what comes next is something few experience, an intimacy with God that changes everything. After all of this, the question remains, have you been persistent in prayer, or have you let fatigue win? If Padre Pio were here, he would tell you not to give up, because each Hail Mary carries a weight that goes beyond what the eyes can see. What do you do when sleepiness hits in the middle of the Rosary? Have you tried changing positions, praying aloud, or even asking Mary for strength? If not, maybe it's time to put into practice what you've learned here. Small changes can completely transform your prayer experience. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever had a meaningful experience while praying the Rosary? Felt peace, received a grace, noticed something different happening in your life? Share in the comments, because your story could inspire someone who needs that encouragement to keep going. What matters most is not praying perfectly, but never abandoning prayer. If this video has helped you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's much more wisdom like this coming your way, and you won't want to miss it.